Hello, everyone. Hello to everyone who's joining us. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We are just gonna take a couple minutes to let everyone trickle in, and we'll probably get started in about 2 to 3 minutes. So while we're waiting, if you can pop in the chat your name, where you're calling in from today, and then if you have a favorite fact about Earth, in the spirit of education, feel free to share that with us as well. Welcome, welcome. Okay. Some people are still trickling in and joining us. So for anyone who is new, we are just popping in the chat our name, location, and our favorite fact about Earth. Very open, free range on that one. And we'll get started in about a minute. Shrimp are one of the loudest animals on Earth. That is a new one. Wow.
Right behind, I think, sperm whales, but pistol shrimp, when they clack their little claws together.
That is so interesting. I wonder what that sounds like in the water. Hmm. Amanda, I'm glad to hear that you're learning a lot at Presidio. Let's see. I'm from the island that is near the planet's deepest trench. So cool.
Oh, cool.
Awesome. Well, I am loving seeing everyone's facts coming in. And I think since it's 5:34, we're gonna go ahead and jump into our panel. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today to celebrate Climate and Justice Education Week. This is a super powerful and important week for us here at Presidio, because Presidio's mission is to educate change makers to build a flourishing future for all. So this week is very resonant with, the values and mission of our school. And I wanted to kick us off with this Nelson Mandela quote, which is truly one of my favorite quotes ever. And it's education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And Presidio, I think, is just the living embodiment of that statement. And so, for those who are joining us who may not know that much about Presidio yet, Presidio was the world's first graduate school of its kind to fully integrate sustainability and social justice into every single class. And I really think that the impact of our alumni network speaks for itself. So for from government officials to chief sustainability officers to entrepreneurs, our community members are really driving systems change through their careers. And then in addition to our graduate programs, Presidio is also, excuse me, is also a super proud of our K through 12 program, which provides free climate education for K through 12 teachers. And climate change education can have a super consequential impact on students' daily behaviors and decision making that reduces their overall lifetime carbon footprint. So research suggests that if only 16% of high school students in high and middle income countries were to receive comprehensive climate change education, we could see nearly a 19 gigaton reduction of carbon dioxide emissions by 2050. And that's an amount that would rank in the top quarter So 15 out of 80 of the presented solutions in Project Drawdown. So education is truly one of the most important tools that we have to create a more just and sustainable future. And now, working as a sustainability professional myself, I've realized that the role of an educator extends so far beyond traditional classroom settings. So, whether we're advocating for policy reform, challenging harmful practices, or simply engaging in conversations with our friends and family, we're all educators in our own way. And indeed, I think that the essence of being a change maker really lies in our ability to effectively communicate, educate, and inspire others to join us in our mission. So, with that, we are absolutely honored to be here today with the incredible, powerful educators and change makers that are joining us so that we can learn from their experiences and wisdom and hopefully use these insights to amplify our collective impact. So, with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to our incredible facilitator for the night, Camille Ling.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Camille. Thank you so much, Callie, for introducing today's panel discussion. I'm so honored to be the moderator for the discussion tonight. I think I've either taught with or been taught by all of the panelists this evening, so really special to get to be in the conversation with you all. My name is Camille Lang. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns, and I'm a proud member of C20 or C38 at Presidio. I'm so excited to almost be halfway through my dual degree program here. To me, Climate and Justice Education Week is a reminder that climate change impacts communities disproportionately. It is up to us to ask questions, learn together, and pursue justice-oriented solutions for the future, for the future of everyone on the planet. Throughout the conversation, I ask all attendees to consider how education on climate and justice topics have made an impact on you personally, whether that is from elementary to post-secondary to professional development, and how you can apply education sector topics to regenerative business practices. Thank you for being here, and let's get into some questions with our amazing panel. So it's Climate Justice Education Week at PGS, and we define that as the educational resources priority to ensure that everyone understands their role in pursuing a fair and just future despite climate change's negative impact on some communities more than others. Climate change is not equitable. It impacts different parts of the world, our oceans, and people disproportionately. So it's up to us to ask those questions and learn together. So remember, just bringing it up again to stay curious, ask your questions, and think about how the education systems you've been a part of so far in your life have impacted your understanding of climate change, justice, social justice issues, and the like. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. All righty. So with that, let's welcome our panelists. To start us off, can each of you introduce yourselves, which program you graduated from at PGS, your cohort, and your current role? I'll start off with Andra.
Yeah. Hi, folks. I'm Andrea Goyen. I actually attended Bainbridge Graduate Institute that is now merged with Presidio, but I also TA'd for Presidio, so I'm feeling good about that. I graduated in 2012, so I think I'm C10. And I'm currently the Chief Innovation Officer at 10 Strands, which is a nonprofit focused on taking environmental and climate action to scale across California for all of the TK-12 schools. And I'll put the link to my organization in the chat box.
So thanks for being here, Andra. Susan, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Susan Wright. I graduated in 2019 with the Masters of Public Administration from Presidio, so PA7. I work now for San Mateo County Sustainability Department, and that includes the county's climate action plans for government operations and unincorporated community, and then we have a couple of energy efficiency programs, and just seeing the connection with schools is one of them. The San Mateo County Energy Watch provides support for K-12 public schools.
Thanks for being here, Susan. Marcia, you want to go next?
Good evening. I'm Marcia Willard. I am not an alum. I think I'm the only non-alum on the panel, but I've been faculty since I think C6. So I've been around for a long time. I teach several classes and am now serving as faculty chair.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Marcia. And Emily, last but not least.
Yeah, thank you. Emily Pellissier. I'm the current executive director of Presidio. Just joined on board in December. I am a C32 part-time MBA, but while getting my MBA, I worked for the last 6 or so years at the UC Berkeley Haas School of Business, leading their Center for Responsible Business as an associate director. So really excited to be coming back to Presidio in this new capacity and to join you all tonight.
Awesome. So you can hear from where people people all have touched Presidio at some point on our panel, and then they've gone off into different sectors. Really, like what Callie was mentioning as she introduced the panel discussion, that you all are educating in unique and different ways that are adding a diverse understanding of what climate change, climate education is, as well as a justice education. So I'm really glad you all are here tonight. The question I'd like to pose to the panelists is, reflecting on your respective roles and expertise, what makes work in the education sector unique and essential for driving systemic change? And how is education interconnected with other sectors, be it nonprofit, business, or government? Emily, do you want to kick us off with the conversation?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And this is such a great question. I mean, I think for those of us who work in education and, serve educational institutions and things like that, for me, really, the impact you have as someone working in education is the impact that your students go out to create. And so really, when I look back on all of the students I've worked with over the years, like, their successes and achievements are our successes and achievements. And it's just such a wonderful way to interact with the world and create impact in the world, and to see those kind of ripple effects go out over the years. So for me, that's really what's most special about education, especially when you're looking at sustainability and social justice, is just the potential for exponential change that students are going to go out and create in the world.
Yeah, that's interesting, Emily. Thank you. Andrew, you mentioned that you're kind of working at the state level to kind of bring climate education to scale. What's that been like, and what do you feel like is unique and essential for driving that change?
Yeah, so I think for education, for me, the reason I focus my time on the formal education sector, I remember this being in my MBA program. I remember how often people would say, well, in order to get people to buy the thing we're trying to sell in our imaginary business, we're really going to need schools to get involved. I remember people saying that over and over again. I was the only teacher in the room for sure, right? And aside from the teachers, but I was the only person who was teaching a 7th grade English class. And so I remember thinking at that time, and even before that, when I was getting my credential at UC Davis, I remember my educational philosophy was about this idea that the education system is a critical cornerstone of our culture. And I know that that's been reinforced by somebody like David Orr. He says that the environmental challenges we face are really just a crisis of the mind. Therefore, the education system has to be involved, right? Or my good friend Zoe Weil has written this book called The World Becomes What We Teach. And that's another just philosophy that I think about all the time, is yeah, that's really true. And so for me, I see it as a really critical sector that has to be engaged. And has to really be driving this forward. And I think just to go a little further on that, I would say, for me, I know Indigenous communities lived on this planet for thousands of years before we broke out and had this paradigm that is really living out of balance with the earth. And it's not like we can't go back, right? It's just a problem of the mind. So the education system has a huge responsibility. And one other thing I could add to that is just that the school, the amount of people who touch the K-12 public education system on a daily basis is about 45% of the population. And so that's a huge leverage point for change. They're either attending school, working at school, or dropping off and picking up kids at school. So if you can help that system become more sustainable, what a huge ripple effect that can have across communities.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. I think, yeah, that problem of the mind and knowing that you get to mold minds in K-12 education, and how I didn't realize 45% of the communities touches a school at some point throughout the day. That's exciting. Susan, you mentioned Energy Watch. I know that's a program that's been kind of working with school systems. Can you talk more about maybe the uniqueness of being in a government role and wanting to infiltrate K-12?
Infiltrate, I love that. Well, yeah,
I'm sorry, maybe that's the way I would describe it.
No, that's awesome. And our sustainability department has both, works on a curriculum side and with students, but I think this is a different spin, is working on the facilities themselves and what we do. And the Energy Watch program is a local government partnership between PG&E and the City and County Association of Governments of San Mateo County, CCAG, and we administer this program for CCAG. But it's designed to help, air quotes, hard to reach sectors access utility programs, incentives, technical assistance to help their physical facilities reduce energy use and emissions. And K-12 public schools are definitely considered hard to reach. We were talking about this last week and answering the questions. Working with schools is like blank. And someone said, trying to hand someone something when their hands are already full. So we have all these goodies to help them, and yet it's difficult for them they're trying to educate people. They're not necessarily thinking about their facilities. And yet, from my understanding, after staff costs, utility costs are probably the second largest thing that schools pay for. So anything we can do to help them reduce their operational costs means there's more money to educate our students. And one other thing, just connection I was going to say is the local governments, cities and counties tend to have climate action plans where have committed to reducing our emissions by a certain amount. And school buildings are within our jurisdictional boundaries, yet we have no oversight, or, we can't make them do anything. They're answering to the state for public schools. But that's why we have these partnerships and programs trying to, hey, look what we have. We're trying to help you and do what we can. Last thing I'll say, with these physical spaces is as we're doing improvements that are making them more sustainable, reducing emissions, it is creating a living laboratory where students can see this in operation, and hopefully take that when they leave school and do more outside of the school. So.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I love that. Yeah. And definitely, I don't know if you saw the other panelists nod their head deeply when you said it's like trying to hand something to someone with their hands full. Like you all have seen that, which is really exciting. Marcia, I'm curious, like, like maybe expanding outside of the K through 12 system, where do you see the interconnectedness at PGS and through the systems change that you teach?
Where do I see the connectedness between?
The interconnectedness with other sectors, like when you're teaching students at the graduate level.
Well, I sort of align with Emily on this. Is that, I've also been a consultant for 30 years, and it was fun to go out and work with organizations one at a time, but it just didn't feel like enough change fast enough. So pouring my energy into the development of professionals, both here at PGS and through the International Society of Sustainability Professionals. And it's a fast-paced field. And it's, it's a real challenge for us at Presidio to keep the curriculum current while still honoring, the core disciplines around an MBA and an MPA. And so it's kind of a wild ride making that connection for people. But our purpose, both at Presidio and at ISSP, is to provide the world with trained, knowledgeable people who can go out and be the army of folks that help implement these changes that we need.
I love that. Yeah. I think that brings it back to Andrew's original point of like, if we can create, like that like ripple effect of educating and having that be kind of how the system changes over time. Any other thoughts about the unique and essential interconnectedness of driving systems change at the education forefront before I move on to the next question?
Well, I'm just reminded of a competency study that we did some years ago through ISSP about, we surveyed people like Susan and Andra who are working in the field and asked them about what kinds of skills and knowledge bases they needed. We fully anticipated they would come back with lots of technical stuff, the science and the greenhouse gas accounting. But what floated to the top were really management skills and systems thinking. Because these problems that we're trying to deal with are so complex. I was just working with Alex today, who's on the call, one of the students in the class that I'm teaching, and understanding, they're mapping all the potential carbon reduction strategies that are available to us, and how many of them look like great ideas until you connect them to the system and understand, well, that will suck carbon out of the air, but it's going to take a lot of energy to do it, or that will put nutrients into the soil, but you have to plant something and rob the soil of it to begin with. And without that ability to see those interconnections, it makes it nearly impossible to address these complex issues.
Thank you for sharing that, Marcia. It's great. All right. Before I move into more questions like meant to start the conversation with one individual, knowing your knowledge and experience, I just wanted to remind those that are tuning in, you are welcome to add questions to the chat. I'm watching them as well as the other co-hosts behind me. We want to make sure that your questions get answered to the panelists here. So feel free to do that. I love the water break that's also naturally happening here. This is beautiful. All right. So just a reminder, keep adding to the chat. Ask your questions and we'll make sure that we get them to our panelists. Thank you again for joining us, everyone. Andrew, I'm going to start with you. You're really at the forefront of innovation on climate education and K-12 education. Could you speak to both the current state of climate education in the K-12 system in California specifically, and what could we expect to see change during the next decade of action?
And first I'll just share that in my roles in education, I've been a classroom teacher. I've been a site level director of sustainability, and when there was only 2 of us full time in the whole country, so it was a really exciting and innovative job. And then I was also the first environmental literacy and sustainability coordinator at a county office of education in California, and now. That was in 2017, and now there's about 6 to 10 other county offices that have made that investment. So it's an innovative time in the field of education. The momentum has really grown over those past 15 years or so. And I know I was really inspired by all the change theory education I got during my time in my MBA program, and actually worked with some colleagues to develop a framework that I think could respond to this question. And the framework is really about understanding that to do paradigm shifting change in a sector like this, you really have to have policy, cultural mindset, which the formal education system has a really key role in, and behavior change. And I think that there's a lot to say for where we're at right now as in California's K-12 education system specifically. So for example, and I'll just put that change there in the chat box. In terms of policy, there's actually a lot of policy. We have a pretty solid statewide policy foundation for climate education and climate action. And Camille and Naomi know this about me. There's a million resources in the chat box for you to understand this. But basically, to say it short, is that we have strong policies in place for curriculum. So there's a solid foundation. So if you're ever in a community where teachers are worried about teaching about climate change, it should be the opposite, right? They are mandated to teach about climate change. Specifically, one of the examples, AB 285, was just passed this last year, that mandates that climate education now be integrated into science grades 1 through 12, which is good because the science standards before also called for climate change education, but it didn't start until 6th grade. So we're seeing the policy part is there. We're also seeing policy at the local school board level. So I think there's been some momentum for certainly policy that's related to environmental and climate action, but also seeing school boards pass environmental education policies, climate literacy policies. We're just finishing up a project right now with UC Berkeley student interns where we've analyzed and collected data across the whole state for which school districts specifically have passed those types of policies. And right now, what I put in the chat box is only the 250 largest school districts, but we should have it for all 1,000 school districts in the next couple months. But needless to say, there's a strong policy foundation. And then in terms of a cultural mindset for this work, there's also a strong foundation for that. Across the United States, 80% of parents want to see climate change being taught in school, and over 85% of teachers also support that. So that's a pretty strong cultural mindset for having that be a part of the system. And then in terms of
is it fair to say that in California that might be that's true in California, not just nationwide?
Yeah, those statistics were for the whole country, but I would say you can guess that California, that reflects pretty well, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, and I know that I have more dated research from 2012 that said 85% of families wanted to see just environmental literacy in school. So, that tracks pretty well for California. And then in terms of actual behavior change, so I said policy, cultural mindset, and then behavior change, we are seeing a shift in our system. So specifically in the higher education system, they have a number of initiatives. Bending the Curve is the initiative for the UC system to have climate literacy. The CSU and UC system have made tremendous investments in their campus sustainability and climate mitigation. And then in K-12, we're seeing this progress. So there's a lot to be done. Like if you were to, it's never enough in my opinion, but like if I squint back for like the last 15 years, I could say there's a huge amount of progress. One of the things that we just hosted in the California Environmental Literacy Initiative was a Bay Area Climate Literacy Exchange, where we brought together a number of districts who passed climate literacy policies and are now trying to move into implementation. And so that was really great to see, like Oakland Unified talking to Berkeley Unified, talking to, San Leandro. Like it was really cool to see them having these conversations. And we had teachers and students in the room. And now Southern California is going to do a version of that as well. So we are seeing movement, and that data project that I put, and I'll put that one back in again. We are seeing, according to certain indicators of like, have school districts invested in a sustainability initiative? Do they have like staff that are running it? Like we are seeing that there is progress and momentum across the state. But it takes a lot to really do this behavior change implementation down to the individual school site and individual teacher. And so I'll just share one last thing. A key project we're working on at 10 Strands is called the Climate Change and Environmental Justice Program. And this was catalyzed by the passage of the policy SB 130, and it called for a $6 million investment made by the state to develop climate and environmental justice units for each grade level. So model units that any teacher could take and teach. So there are like 3-week units with 15 lessons, and they basically demonstrate how do you actually do this in the classroom with students, and they're place-based, they're project-based, and these are going to be piloted in this coming school year and then available publicly to everyone in the spring of 2025. So that's a really exciting project that really aims to hit at that behavior change piece and move it forward. So like to sum that all up, I would say current status is that we have a strong foundation. But to go to scale for every single classroom and every single school site, there's a lot of work to be done. But there are people in the field trying to move that forward.
That's exciting and comprehensive. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And definitely check out Andrew's resources in the chat. I know they've helped me learn a lot, especially in our conversations. I'm curious, other panelists, do you have thoughts, feelings about the paradigm shift that Andrew was just navigating and working on? If not, totally cool. It's okay.
Follow Andrew's whirlwind of activity. It makes me think that we talk a lot, certainly in my class, but in the program, about paradigm shifts and mental models. And it's really interesting to think about the things that we take for granted and that are sort of our operating system, that are embedded in our brain, the truths that we hold that may be anachronistic now. And it's one of my favorite things to do is in the program, we try and get students to sort of challenge about why do you think that way? And is that belief still holding value for you, given the situation that we're in? And I try to have those kind of conversations with clients too, because that's when the light bulbs really go on. So thank you for planting the seed in the K-12 system.
Yeah, and I did want to just address Cody's question really quick.
Thank you,
would
Andrew.
say for me, we talk about equity a lot in the education system, and that can mean different things to different people. For me, I always raise up the issue of accessibility, in particular language access. I have a mother who's deaf in one ear, and have always been really aware of this as an issue. And so we talk about teaching in the outdoors a lot. And so we do talk about, like, when you're teaching in the outdoors, you're teaching in different spaces, like, how do you make this accessible? And then in terms of language access, that doesn't have to do necessarily with hearing, but with with English language development, we talk about how teaching in the outdoors, teaching through gardens, teaching with experiential hands-on learning that has to do with the environment is great for language access. And we can show tons of data that shows that students, ELD students have made larger gains when using environmental education than students who are not, right? So there is a lot to say for that. But there's also, again, it's not enough, and there's a lot more to be done in terms of accessibility, in particular for outdoor and garden-based education.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for addressing Cody's question. And I think just like understanding that like we need to ask those questions now to kind of like build on that base that and like plant that seed, right? Like in making sure that we're bringing the same level of concern about information access and language access. Shifting gears, Susan, I kind of wanted to hear where you sit with this paradigm shift. I know you facilitate partnerships between K-12 schools, government agencies, and community organizations in San Mateo County through the Sustainability Department. How has this initiative been going in the county, and what successes or challenges have you encountered so far?
Yeah, I was saying a minute ago that the county has had resources for schools for a really long time. I want to say like 20 years. I should have looked it up, but especially with our waste reduction team providing education about the 4 R's and field trips to the recycling center, that kind of thing for a really long time. The Energy Watch program I told you about it, started in 2014. It was providing help for the schools to access energy efficiency funds from the state of California that were allocated to every school through Proposition 39. So there are things like that. And now we have things, school gardens, the Youth Climate Ambassadors program. There's some new things about connecting to help put stormwater infrastructure at school sites. We're really recently starting to think about workforce development opportunities as it relates to our decarbonization programs. But it's interesting because I don't think Andrea mentioned her Office of Education experience was at the San Mateo County Office of Education, and this connection that really got us thinking about in San Mateo County, how we could be better about, we just have a whole bunch of different offerings and we're all trying to talk to schools separately. And she's like, hey, could you guys maybe get together and think about this more holistically so we can make it easier for the schools to access what you have. And so we have been doing that. And in fact, recently, the last month or so, we've met with people who have different offerings for schools. We've been meeting and talking about it and kind of creating a mission statement and wanting to understand better what each other do so that there is this huge connection between the facility side, connecting with the students themselves. And one thing, for instance, that we're learning from the Youth Climate Ambassadors program is that when there are engaged students who are pushing at a school site, they're much more likely to start having projects to put solar panels up or do other things. And so it's a real win-win if we can be kind of working together, or like if we're doing a facilities project to make sure that there's some educational element that people can learn from on the site. But it was interesting. I was recently talking with someone at the Office of Education, and she said that schools it's like they have a moat around them. It's really hard for anyone else to get in. And she said they realize at the Office of Education they're being asked to help provide transport over the moat. And so if they can be better at filling that role, that's what we need. We're all here and we have these great programs, but how can we work together to get over the moat and really serve folks, at the schools and school districts that we really can help with these programs.
That's great. I don't know if you see Andrea in the chat sharing, yes, schools are their own feudal kingdoms. Well put. Oh my gosh. There's a question from Mary that came into our Q&A asking for just like knowledge experience for you, Susan, on bringing more cycling into school systems, working with bike coalitions, safe routes to school. Maybe Andrew could speak to this too. There's a curiosity about what's going on in San Mateo County, but also just maybe like greening the way people get to school and to and from school. I don't know if others have experienced knowledge with that. I'd love to hear more about what, so sorry, I'll rephrase the question. We want to get the best way to get through to the minds of early developing minds and to ensure the paradigm shift we all dream of takes hold is seeing things happen at the school system, thinking about cycling to and from school. What would make the county do more of this kind of initiative? And does anyone have experience on the panel working on initiatives like this?
The question, I'm just reading it. Thank you, Mary, for that question. It's an interesting question. Are you talking about the county, the school system, the Office of Education? Like what are people's roles? And so the county doesn't have as I said, any specific oversight, but there's the Safe Routes to School program. that's working with the school districts. Andrew could probably tell how that works exactly. I mean, I think there can be different programs, but so I guess the question is, what would make the county do more of this? I think a lot of this is just having the resources. And then when we were talking about that whole thing of how do you help a school take more advantage of it is a question. So, I mean, sometimes I think that's going through the administration. Sometimes it's through a parents group, through a, green team. It's really just trying to see where there's people who have the capacity or whatever to take part. But anyway, that's just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, and I can share like 2 other things. So one thing that we did while I was there at the San Mateo County Office of Ed is we worked really closely with Safe Routes and Flows to Bay, which cared about stormwater management. And so we did the technical aspects of making it safer to do this, to actually bike to school. And then we received some funding from the federal government to develop actually curriculum, getting back to that cultural mindset piece. And so we did a solutionary project-based learning unit that was around transportation, and it was geared towards 2nd and 4th grade. And we really looked at like, how do we help small children really understand this? And all of that was also part of a broader initiative that was trying to reduce traffic fatalities and in accidents that had to do with biking. So it was a very comprehensive countywide, look from all these different agencies that got down to like actual 2nd and 4th graders. Now, are there a whole bunch more people biking? I'm not entirely sure, right? But I can say that there was an effort to do that. And it was a system, like the way we were going about it was definitely using systems thinking and figuring out like all these different angles and all these different leverage points for change so that we could try to get those elementary school students to school safely on a bike.
Thank you both. And thank you, Mary, again for the question. I think that was such a great case study in how the paradigm shift actually works, looking at it from like a regional perspective. All right, higher ed folks, I have questions for you now. Are you ready? Emily, I'll start with you. In your previous role at UC Berkeley and now as Presidio's executive director, you have a unique perspective on how institutions of higher education are addressing climate and justice education. How have you seen other institutions of higher education adapting to the needs of emergent interests of students by addressing like these climate and justice topics in curriculum? What's it been like to update that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a very dynamic 5 to 10 years, especially as we look at the social upheavals of the murder of George Floyd, the Trump presidency, climate impacts that we're seeing day to day. You really do see these topics coming to life in higher education, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. And you see schools really having to react and adapt to that very quickly. So as part of my work at UC Berkeley and now at Presidio, I'm part of a coalition of sustainability centers at universities all over the world who connect and talk and have a lot of peers in this space. And across the board, we're really seeing institutions of higher education coming to terms with the fact that sustainability is mainstream. Like if you're graduating a management professional, they need to be versed in climate change, they need to be versed in equity, and they need to be able to go out and lead in these spaces. It's a business imperative and a public administration imperative these days. So a lot of the bigger schools and institutions are really grappling with big, kind of heavy systems that are struggling to keep up with the student demand for this type of content. And how do you iterate and be innovative with curriculum and match the needs of students? And touting Presidio's horns, we're very lucky that sustainability and social justice have been integrated not only in our elective offerings, but in our core curriculum from day one. That's really kind of who we are as an institution. But the industry is also at an interesting point where sustainability is becoming more mainstream. More institutions of higher education are offering sustainability content. More businesses are prioritizing sustainability. And so there's really kind of this question of what comes next. And for me, when you're looking out in industry, it really feels like ESG and the rise of ESG regulation, these types of things have really created a foundation of this is what it means to do sustainability. Here's the platform we're all building off of. But in some ways, to me, that's also become a bit of a race to the bottom of here's the box we all tick. And it's really kind of pushing and asking this question for me of climate change is more urgent than ever. if sustainability is mainstream, what are we doing? And what more do we need to be doing? And this is where I think there's a suite of higher ed institutions, Presidio being one of them, who are really taking this systems-oriented approach, which I've heard coming up a lot already this evening, of, again, these larger paradigm shifts, moving beyond just a silver bullet solution, but looking at what are these really collaborative, intersectional ways that we can start to change the way capitalism is structured, the way our societies are structured, for both, environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability and equity. So I don't have an answer to that yet. I love chatting with our students because I'm like, what is it that comes next, and how do we keep pushing the envelope? And I think that will continue to be a priority for us at Presidio.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, also being a student, like it's great to like have that curiosity fostered, I think, in an academic institution, and just like listening closely to what are the interests that are happening and how does that intersect with what we can see businesses and outside of the academia is up to as well. Thank you, Emily. Marcia, I have a question for you. So in addition to your role as a faculty chair at Presidio, you are also a founder of the International Society of Sustainability Professionals, or ISSP, which you've already mentioned. And ISSP emphasizes the importance of continuous learning and education in the field of sustainability. Could you elaborate on why ongoing education is crucial for sustainability professionals, and what resources you go to in order to stay updated on the latest trends and best practices?
Yeah. Oi, well, Emily has said it. This is an amazing field to be in at an amazing time. And it feels like trying to learn to sail on a boat in a big storm and it's sinking. So, you're working as fast as you can with the tools that you have, and every once in a while something new comes popping up. Last term, I was trying to put together a webinar for my class on sustainability reporting standards. And I gave it a shot, and then I thought, I give up. I'm going to wait until this settles. It's like there's so much swirling. There's about 6 or 7 standards out there, and some of them are getting married to each other and they're aligning, and it's very confusing. And it's hard for a professional to stay current when things are changing that fast. So there's this swirl of new developments, new regulations, new standards, new technologies that are, you want to stay on top of. And then there's this core that I don't think has changed in the last decade or so, last couple of decades, that, this need, as we've said, for being facile with systems thinking and understanding complex systems and how to intervene in them. We still see the need for building a financial business case for sustainability ideas. And this paradigm that we finally moved off the paradigm that sustainability is a nice thing to do if you want to look good to the world, to it becoming a more strategic imperative. But most organizations are still thinking about, how do I be less bad? How do I minimize or diminish my negative impacts? And we're trying very hard at Presidio to elevate that conversation, to say, well, let's stop talking about that and talk about how business can actually contribute to the environment and to society and make things better. What if your employees were just better human beings as a result of working in your business? What if your community were better for having you there? And I don't think these are idealistic questions anymore because of the situation that we're in. We need to teach people how to think really outside the box, to think beyond sustainability to being regenerative. So, it's really hard. I stay connected to ISSP because they are good at sort of spoon feeding me the latest stuff. It's a curated list that I can trust of all the information that they're gathering together. So they've become a trusted source for me. I also subscribe to other news feeds that I feel have some integrity, like Sustainable Brands and Green Biz. And those come across a couple times a day, each of them. So, it's just how fast things are going.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the way you were talking about like this reframing of the question, and maybe it's a reframing of the paradigm that we kind of need to go into now, is like, how do we contribute? How do we call people into this space rather than calling people out for doing bad like we have been historically?
I mean,
It's
I
exciting.
tell clients, I tell the students, sustainability means sustaining what you have, but what we have is not so good.
That's right.
So we really have to, it's not good enough to just stay the way we are. We really have to start putting things back together. And it's creating a whole new, movement of innovation around how we make things and how we deliver services and how we interact with the planet. So it's really very interesting. It's a fun time. There's a quote that I use in class every year that's become my new mantra that I stole from a climate scientist who's down at the University of Texas. And she said, "It's a marvelous thing to be alive in times that matter so much." And I'm really inspired by that. It says, yeah, we get to live lives of purpose. What could be a better gift? So we're all alive at just the right time.
That's beautiful. Susan, continue. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Marcia, as you were talking, reflecting on how do we, in this helping people understand how to be better rather than just less bad, thinking about how also can we be working beyond our official education system? Because we have a public that there's just so many people who need to understand this, and yet how are we doing it? One thing that we're working on scoping right now is a public education campaign around explaining electrification, decarbonization. Basically, our electricity is so clean that we're now trying to get off of natural gas and move to electricity. But there's a lot of fears, misunderstandings, misinformation, all of this. And what we're hearing from others who are trying to work on this is like, at a very basic level, we just need to have people understand, or at least not be worried about, we just need more awareness about this. So we're starting to think about, well, what are the different channels? Who needs to understand what, and what are other avenues? Is it book clubs? Is it through schools? Is it through, what are other places where people congregate and that they might be willing to hear about something? So we're starting to think about this, and how do you help the public understand a whole new, very complicated thing, because we need them to be participating in it.
Susan, you made me think about there's pretty good research to suggest that you can get people's attention by scaring them, which we're starting to see a lot of. But you can, if you push that a little too far, yeah, it goes bad really fast. And it's amazing to me that we're in this really existential crisis as a planet, as a species. And this should be the perfect opportunity to bring people together with a shared interest and a shared goal. And if we do anything around education, I'd like to see things framed more like that, yeah, you should be worried, but look at the people around you. We're all in the same boat, and if we pull together, we can get out of this. And stop being afraid of everyone. There was a book I read that I thought made the best case for why people were denying the climate change. And the author said that it wasn't really that they didn't believe the science. It was that when they heard what the solutions looked like, it looked like big government telling them what to do. And that's just a framing issue, right? Yeah, so I think the messaging is going to be real important in the next decade or so.
And I also want to jump in here to make this more explicit in the conversation as well, which is that I think we're also increasingly seeing businesses, education, government, everyone kind of grapple with the intersectionality of the climate crisis and sustainability. And so I feel like when I first started my career, it was very much you're either doing environmental sustainability or you're doing DE&I, and this is coming in the sustainable business space specifically. And now we're really seeing like, no, these issues are the same. And when you start to look at things from an iterative systems lens, you really see that, tackling the climate crisis also has really important social implications. I think we're, you know, coming around on that and starting to figure out how to tackle that in a more equitable way, but there's still so much room and so much space for growth within higher ed, but just throughout the educational journey in terms of where does the social piece come in and what does social equity look like in the face of climate change.
Yeah, I'd like to just share one other thought there. I feel like I remember coming into my job in San Mateo County in 2017 and not knowing much about San Mateo County. They were like super on the forefront of this. Like every single city had a climate action plan, and like they were using the word climate adaptation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in this field and I've never heard people say this word really. Like, and I remember being like, oh my gosh, we are in a whole nother area. You guys are done with climate mitigation, you're on adaptation. I remember like my own feelings of just like, I just had a baby. What are we doing? Like it was so overwhelming. And at that time, because I was starting my new job, I was like, I have to help our K-12 system bring this to K-12 with using trauma-informed practices. So understanding like how to begin this conversation, not just with children, but with adults of like, here's the reality, here's the data, like your projections for fires and floods and all these climate impacts are real and you're experiencing them right now. Like that water damage on your campus, that's sea level rise, right? Like talking to them, but doing it in a way that's really trauma informed and helping them like grasp the seasonal element of climate change and climate impacts. And so we've done a ton of work. I did a ton of work while I was in San Mateo County, and we're expanding that now at 10 Strands of just how to really bring this work to education in a trauma-informed way. And it's hard, it's really hard, but it's so important. And I would say that the counselors and school counselors have been some of the like so grateful that somebody's finally talking about this. They're like, you don't know how many kids come in to my office talking about climate anxiety, and I have zero resources. So there's a big need for this in schools.
Yeah, that's it's amazing to think about like how to shift the way we tell the story too. And when we come together, that we're telling a story that's interconnected, trauma informed, and you know, highlighting there's change that's possible when we come together, and when we stay siloed, that's why kind of where the fear festers, I think.
And I'll just add one last thing, Camille, and it's really important that people recognize that nature's not the problem. Nature is our friend, and it's the thing that's going to help us survive, right? So like I heard that a lot from people, well, maybe we'll just stay indoors then because it's just too scary. And I'm like, no, wrong. Let's try this way.
Yeah. I was just in a meeting earlier this week, and they were sharing that like, you know, nature knows the way. Like if we follow nature and embrace and like let it foster like what we're doing in people, and like, you know, how we like engage in people and connecting in those spaces, like we've got this. I know it's not the silver bullet, like Emily mentioned, there's not one silver bullet in just following nature and spending time outside, but I think that helps ground truth, maybe why we don't need to lead with fear, especially in K through 12 systems. All right, before I ask my last question, I wanted to turn it over to everyone that's tuning in. If you have questions for our panel, we have about 5 minutes left with the group, but it's not lost on me of all the female bodies in this space. And so my last question for you all are, what are some ways that individuals, organizations, and governments can work together to promote gender equality and empower women? And what advice would you give to allies who want to support women in this field and in all fields, truthfully?
I'll chime in because I have a quick answer that's kind of guided my own DE&I journey and anti-racism journey. And I think there's kind of 3 phases of you learn, you practice, and you preach. So, you know, going through this iterative process of being aware of the issues, being aware of the different, you know, lived experiences, taking the time to learn and read and absorb, but not stopping there, practicing. What does it look like, you know, to see gender inequity or any inequity showing up out in the world? How do you see that and identify that and really look for that? And then how do you really take action, and how do you preach, and how do you constructively intervene when you do see inequities happening, gender or otherwise? And so I think really kind of going through that iterative process over and over again. If you've reached the point where you're preaching, start again and start learning again, you know, and continue to move through that cycle. That's helped to guide me on my journey.
Sir, can I get that list again? I want to like hold on to it in my brain for a long time.
Yeah, it's learn, practice, preach.
And I like that you also like alluded to it being cyclical too. Like you can They're all connected. You just move back around. What do others think? Empowering women in the space.
Camille, I'm not sure I have the answer to that, but just an observation that Presidio Graduate School has always had more women than men enroll in it. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think we're attracting that to the field. And when I look at the membership, which of ISSP, which is several thousand, there too more women than men. So maybe the question is, how can we women who are evidently dominating this field be sure that we're as equitably minded as we would love men and other, protected classes behave?
Yeah, that's excellent. I love that reframing of it. Thank you.
I was going to say something similar in that in our department, I think we have to almost be careful to make sure that we're bringing men into it and not being so female dominated just for a sense of diversity from that sense. But then I think too about how, within our county departments or whatever, a lot of the people that we need to interact with and bring along are male dominated fields. So how do we really infuse or help other people infuse into roles that maybe you don't think about as being sustainability, but like a planner or someone in public works or whatever, and help to make sure that even a sustainability voice at all is part of that field. But then I would just say, I guess what personally I do is more on an individual level of just mentoring or trying to help reach back, pull other people up the ladder, or help other people with their career journey as others have helped me. And so that's how I think of it, maybe more individually than holistically. But
Yeah, I feel like this one's so tough. I'm landing somewhere where Marsha and Susan are. I definitely, my thoughts are that it's so critical that as a people that we figure out how to take the best of female culture, male culture, non-binary culture, and celebrate that and engage with the diversity of that and bring that into the space and into the work that we do together. And I say that thinking about like raising two young children that are currently identifying like as male or as non-binary, and thinking about how they see that world and see that space and where they feel safe. Yeah, so I appreciate that question, Camille, and I think it's hard. It's a hard one to really think through thoughtfully, knowing that the education field in K-12 is dominated by women and also is environmentalism.
Yeah, it is an interesting parallel. I think like a lot of women are assumed to be the educator in spaces and trusted to be in the K-12 teacher, but and then you also are like someone that you might see in the sustainability space. So how do we reframe and bring more people into the fold, celebrate the gender diversity? All right, we got one more question from the audience before I turn it back to Callie to wrap us up. Mary's asking a question for Susan. Who would be the best person to reach out to in San Mateo County Office for data requests? Oh, data.
sorry, it would probably depend on the type of data. So you could always just email me and I could point you. For sure.
That sounds great. Mary
There's
also
also an
offered
open
her email address. Yeah.
Oh, good. I was going to say there's also the open data portal on San Mateo County as well that you could Google that. I could find it and put it in the chat too. So
yeah, ground truthing and data, I think, is something that PGS teaches us. And so I see where Mary's going from. And Mary, I'll make sure that Susan has your email address when we follow up here. Well, with that, I'll hand it over to Callie. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your thoughts and feedback on what's going on in this space.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And thank you, Cam. That was so inspiring and informative. So I just really appreciate you all sharing your wisdom and insights with us. And thank you to everyone who joined. If you are a prospective student and you're interested in learning more about Presidio's programs, I just popped a link in the chat where you can go ahead and see the events that we have coming up. We have a information session happening on April 10th next week. And so, yeah, again, thank you everyone for joining. And with that, have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank an educator. They really changed your mind.
thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.